you all for joining us for the Applying for Graduate College Scholarship Workshop. Joining us today are Brianne Heinel, Executive Director of Graduate Financial Services and Business Operations, Dr. Jana Dufek, Associate Dean and Professor, School of Integrated Health Sciences, and Nicole Thomas, graduate student and graduate research assistant, GPSA secretary, and fellowship recipient. So they will be reviewing scholarship opportunities, providing you with application tips, and answering any other questions that you might have. So I'm going to hand it over to them to introduce themselves, and then we will open it up to questions.
Shall I start? Oh, go for it, Janet.
I was going to say, I'm the oldest, right? Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. As Nev said, my name is Janet Dufek, and I'm the Associate Dean in the School of Integrated Health Sciences. Academically, I'm a professor with a research expertise in biomechanics. I'm also very much involved with graduate education in the graduate school and take pleasure in having the opportunity to present in formats such as this. So good morning and welcome.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Brianne. As Nev said, I'm the Executive Director of Graduate Financial Services and Business Operations. I've been with the Graduate College for about 8 years now, maybe a little longer, and have been working specifically with the Graduate College Scholarship and Fellowship process for that long. So I've seen a lot of applications come through. I've done this process, feels like a million times now. So I hopefully will have a lot of good tips and tricks for you guys in terms of submitting your application and working with the committee and all that good stuff.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Thomas. I'm currently a graduate student in curriculum and instruction over in the College of Education. My background is actually in biology. So I received my undergraduate degree from UNLV, and now I'm doing science education. So the fellowship that I received I applied for and then received last year was the Nevada NASA Space Grant Consortium Fellowship. So that's an award that's $17,000 and it's sponsored, basically my thesis research. So it's been an amazing opportunity. Alongside that, I also am a part of the GPSA. So I'm their secretary, meaning that I help with sponsorship applications. I've gone through like scoring committees, things like that. So I'm pretty well versed in how to apply for scholarships and how to score them, which really helps in applying for them. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have about the application process or anything like that.
Thank you all so much. So let's start with some basics. Can you talk a little bit about what's the difference between a scholarship and a fellowship?
So you're waiting for me to go first, Bree?
I didn't want to jump in there, but you know I'm always ready.
Let me start from an academic perspective and then allow Nicole and Brianne to address things specific to the graduate college. In general, when one talks about a scholarship, it definitely has a tie to financial aid. So there's some financial benefit for that. As opposed to a fellowship, which is viewed academically as sort of a position. So one might have a fellowship at Cambridge, something like that. Now there could be financial ties to a fellowship, but it may also simply be a position of dignity, if you will. Scholarships are typically awarded earlier in an academic career, and fellowships more senior. They're more, in one sense, prestigious, if you will. So that's what I have to say from an academic perspective. I believe Nicole and Brianne can probably address the question better from a financial perspective. I think there are some cutoffs financially as well that Bree and Nicole can address. Thank you.
You want me to go, Nicole? Okay, so looking from a financial perspective, scholarships and fellowships are the same in that you apply for both of them, and they're both generally merit-based. On scholarships, they can be based more on financial need as well as merit, and they're generally smaller amounts. I typically see scholarships that are no more than $5,000 for the academic year. For fellowships, they're more based on your research. They have a strenuous review process. They're higher dollar amounts, so they cover your tuition, your fees, your health insurance, and then also provide a stipend for living and other academic support. For some fellowships, we see that you have to be nominated actually by a faculty member on campus. Some fellowships, there's only one nomination that's allowed per college. So they're definitely more prestigious, a strenuous application process. They cover more living expenses, and they're tied specifically to your research area. So definitely a little bit more competitive as well.
And just to add on to what Brianne said, so for my fellowship here in Nevada, I'm essentially basically part of a cohort. So there's like, I'd say 6 or 7 other students within the state of Nevada who have also received this fellowship. And we present our work at like the conference. We kind of move along the process like as a group. So it's more than just receiving money to pay for like research supplies. It's kind of all encompassing, where it's that funding pays for my conferences, that funding pays for my living expenses. The entire point of it is to essentially supplement me in order for me to continue doing my research. So that's kind of the difference between like receiving a fellowship as opposed to receiving a scholarship. And both are super useful. Both contain money, obviously. So it's just kind of the different levels of that.
So I think Nicole makes an excellent point in that she was talking about the cohort. And in the fellowship, there's usually, it's not a one-way thing. It's not a you get it all. There's some, you give something back. And I think Nicole addressed that in going to conferences and such. And that's an important part in the prestige as well, because you then get exposure of your research and of what you're doing from an academic perspective.
Thank you all. So while we're on the topic of clarifying some terms, what is the difference between a grant and a loan?
So grants you don't have to give back normally. Loans are to supplement your college career. So that's whether through a private lender or a public lender, like Department of Education or something like that. And then you have your grants, which are basically like, for example, we have like the graduate retention grant, the emergency grant, where it's if you are struggling due to COVID-19 or if outside of pandemic, you need funding or anything like that. Those are sums of money that are granted to you that you don't have to pay back.
And just to clarify, with grants at UNLV, we base those on financial need. So grants are really based, where scholarships and fellowships are more merit-based. Grants are for students who have lower EFC, which is your estimated family contribution. And that's determined by filling out the FAFSA and the alternate need determination form. So there's 2 forms at UNLV that you can use to determine need. So you have your free application for federal student aid, that's through the US government. And then we have a form for students who are not FAFSA eligible, and it's called the alternate need determination form. This form's available on financial aid's website and can be submitted directly to financial aid. So in order for UNLV to determine your need, we have to have those forms completed, and there's actually a priority deadline at UNLV. Actually, I believe it's everywhere, not just UNLV, but it's November 1st is a priority deadline to fill out those forms. So basically there's free monies in the form of grants for students with high need. Once that money runs out, there's no more to give out for that year. So we actually start looking at EFCs in November when that application is due. So the earlier that you have your FAFSA or your alternate need determination form in, and you have financial need, the more likely you are to get funding. And a lot of these funds, there's no application process. It's actually just based on your needs. So I don't know if any students here have the graduate access grant on your financial aid package. It's $2,000 a semester. It just kind of just shows up. Students think like magic, but it's actually based on your EFC, and it's based on that November 1st deadline. So I did definitely want to plug the FAFSA and the alternate need determination form. Even if you're not getting loans, you're not applying for scholarships or fellowships, I always strongly recommend that you get those forms in by the priority deadline, because there is money out there that we can just add to your account if you're eligible for it.
I think just one other minor point relative to discussion about money. At UNLV, the procedure is any funds that you're granted go through your student account. So they all go through financial aid. No one's going to hand you a check, right?
Thank you. So we have a question here in the chat. Where do we apply? I think Bree can tell us a bit about this one.
Is that for the FAFSA and the alternate need determination form? You can go directly to financial aid's website. So UNLV Financial Aid and Scholarships, and there's a link there that says apply for aid. When you click on that link, it's going to show you the FAFSA. And it'll take you to the FAFSA website. It'll show you your school ID and everything you need to submit. From the alternate need determination form, from the apply for aid, it's a little bit tricky to get there, but I look at it a lot, so I know the path. You go to forms, and then you go to forms for the current year. So they'll have the years listed 2021, 21, 22. From there, you'll go to your current year. You'll see the alternate need determination form. Click on that form, you'll fill it out. And the easiest way to submit that is from Financial Aid's website. You can log into your student portal. You'll see a little link that says login, and you're going to use your ACE ID. As a graduate student, you use your ACE ID, login, and password to log into the Financial Aid student portal. From here, you're going to see a link that says forms. You'll click on it, and then I believe it says like alternate forms or additional forms. You'll click there, and you'll specifically upload that financial aid document. I believe it says financial aid document when you upload it and not specifically alternate need determination form. But that's the easiest way to submit that form. They say that you can drop it off in person, which we know we're not really doing that right now. Another way is fax, but who has a fax machine? I don't know. So I would say use that student portal. That student portal is also really helpful because you can ask questions to financial aid within that portal, and it's usually easier to get a response back through there.
Thanks, Bree. So can you discuss what the application process looks like for scholarships and fellowships? And I'm sure our panelists are going to can address this process from different perspectives that they've experienced with.
You guys want me to start on this one?
Yes.
Okay, so the process really starts at the graduate college. We open our graduate college scholarship application portal every year on October 1st through the Grad Rebel Gateway. So as grad students, you all have a Grad Rebel Gateway login and password. This is where you've applied for admissions. This is where you apply for graduate assistantships, and you apply for graduate college scholarships and fellowships, which is what I will specifically address here. So our application portal is open on October 1st, and it closes on December 1st every year. This is where you're going to go in, you're going to see the scholarships and fellowships that you're eligible to apply for. This is where you're going to submit all the application material. I think it's really important to first take a look at our website, because on our website, we're going to tell you everything that you need to submit for each specific application. So while all applications require a letter of recommendation, a CV, a statement of purpose, each application material could want you to address different things. So before you go on to start that application, I think it's really important to go read through the requirements, make sure that you're eligible, and make sure that you're addressing the things that you need to address for each specific application. After, I'll tell you a little bit about the timeline. Oh, thanks, Neff. Just looking at your notes. If you want to, the timeline from the time that you submit when we are reviewing. So after December 1st is when we need all application materials submitted, with the exception of your letter of recommendation. Your recommendation providers have until December 15th to submit those the letters into the portal. After December 15th, the graduate college is going to look at every application that was submitted, and we're going to make sure that you meet the minimum requirements, so that you're in the right program for the award that you applied for, that you meet the minimum GPA requirements, and that you've submitted all your application materials, your statement of purpose, any additional materials that the application might need, and then of course your letter of recommendation. Things the graduate college is not looking at is we're not looking at the content of your statement of purpose. That's something that the committee is taking a look at. We're not looking at the page limit or anything like that. We're making sure that you have the documents submitted. Last year, we received 945 applications. So we're really just trying to dwindle down who meets the minimum requirements for the committee to look at. The committee will begin looking at the applications in January, and that has multiple steps in the process that I won't go into details with, but generally They are making recommendations to the Graduate College in February, and the Graduate College is sending out the letters of funding or regret letters later in March. So that's an overall picture of the Graduate College process.
Okay, let me try to address some of the details relative to your packet itself or your application itself. And again, just globally. The first point that I want to make ties into something that Brianne mentioned, and that's the specific requirements of the particular scholarship or fellowship. If there are particular attributes or skill sets or outcomes that are requested for that application, be sure to address those in your statement of purpose or letter of intent or whatever it's called. And further, it would be wise for you to have a conversation with your person who's writing your letter of recommendation to assure that they understand all of the criteria for the requirements for the fellowship. So that may seem pretty obvious, but it's a detail that really is something that can separate out, being top on the list, being in the middle, and being toward the bottom. The other piece, I'll just say one more thing, and then I'll let Nicole add her comments. But certainly the presentation of your package is important. Most all of you are probably using Microsoft Word to type your documents, right? And when you see those squiggly lines under a word that suggests it's misspelled, pay attention to that, all right? There are many artificial intelligence techniques that are available to you behind the scenes for tools such as things like this. And the care and caution that you devote to presenting your document, to present yourself as a scholar, is quite important. So I think Nicole can probably pick up from there and add some things.
Definitely, yeah. Something that I really want to mention is planning ahead, like long term. So something that I do, basically, I identify any scholarships, fellowships that I want to apply for over the course of the next year. So it's really important to do that ahead of time because you don't want an application to open up and then kind of scramble to get all of your things together and have that done, and then find out that your funding actually doesn't, take place until 2 semesters later. So it's like something where it's like if you're applying in October and then you get a funding decision in March, that usually applies for the year after that. So something that's really simple to do, if you see anything that you want to apply for, I honestly set calendar alerts like way in advance. So, where it's like, if you don't qualify for it currently, like say that you're not enrolled in enough credits, or you have to be a certain point within your graduate career, then next year you'd be able to apply for it. So you could put that in your calendar, forget about it for a few months, and then come back to it. Something else that I would suggest is going back on what Dr. Dufek said, is definitely work with the person who's recommending you. I'm applying for it's technically an award right now, but it's basically everything that like the nominator has to fill out. So it says like the nominator. That's normally your PI or your advisor, or another professor or individual that knows you through your academic and research career. Being able to work with them and letting them know like what you want out of this, what to focus on, is definitely really helpful, and say, okay, well, this one is geared more towards like service that I've done while at UNLV. So working with an individual that knows your service and knows like everything that you've done as opposed to just academics, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Nicole. So going back to the deadline part of the process, is the deadline typically the same for all scholarships and fellowships that are found on the Graduate College website?
So that is typical of the majority of scholarships and fellowships that we have, but there are some that are open longer and for different time periods. Like we have some need-based awards, like the Child Care Access Award, that's open year-round because those needs can change. So it's really important when you're looking at the graduate college website that you are clicking on each specific award to see that application deadline. Like I said, the majority is December 1st, but there's also some different types of awards on our website, like the Thesis and Dissertation Award, the Outstanding Graduate Student Teaching Award. So it's really just important to make sure that you're watching those deadlines to make sure your application is submitted on time.
Thank you. So we have addressed a little bit about scholarships, fellowships, grants, and loans, but do graduate assistantships also come with tuition reimbursement? Can you tell us a little bit about GA-ships in general?
You want me to take this one? So as part of my duties here at the Graduate College, I also oversee the Graduate Assistantship Program. And so yes, GA-ships do typically come with tuition waivers and health insurance waivers. So while you're a GA at UNLV, your non-resident tuition is waived if you're considered non-resident. So that's about $14,000 a year benefit that comes with being a GA. There's different types of funding with being a GA, and those tuition waiver packages can vary. For the majority of GAs on campus, they're considered state funded, and those come with a standard tuition waiver of 9 graduate credits per semester. As a state funded GA, which is typically your research and your teaching GAs, we waive 9 credits per semester of the graduate registration fee. So that is your course registration fee and does not include any special fees, differential fees, anything like that. We also waive $500 of the mandatory student health insurance. So as a GA, that's automatically placed on your account when we code you as a GA. So the fee goes onto your account, and then we take off $500 of that fee. We have probably over 1,000, definitely over 1,000 GAs on campus. And those come with different stipend packages based on your academic level and your degree program. They are typically for the academic year. You should definitely work with your graduate coordinators in your department if you're interested in applying for a GA to see what their application process is like. And then just make sure that you're getting your applications in yearly in a timely manner. I want to say, I don't have it off the top of my head, but I believe we say, I'm not even gonna tell you, I'm gonna look it up. I'm gonna pass it on to someone else to tell you more about GAs, and I'm gonna look up our application deadline fast.
Let me, this seems obvious, but be sure that you apply, that you make an application for a GA-ship. They're not automatic, and they're for the academic year, so they're not, you must apply every year. There are several students that keep saying, I haven't been appointed yet, I haven't received my letter, or da-da-da, and they go to their graduate coordinator, and their graduate coordinator says, hey, they haven't even applied, I can't appoint them. So be sure that you make that application.
And I want to say that the deadline's in March. Okay, I think that's when it is. So I'm a graduate assistant for the undergraduate student government here at UNLV. And similar to what Bree was saying, thankfully it covers my tuition, and it also provides a monthly stipend. So that ranges depending on your degree level, as well as what program you're in. Different programs have different like baseline requirements. And then I believe there's a baseline like funding requirement across the university where you have to be paid at least this amount of money. So there's always going to be like a stipend associated with it and some sort of tuition waiver. And with a GA-ship, you spend 20 hours a week, whether that's teaching, research, depending on what you're doing. Like mine, since I work with the student government, I spend 20 hours a week like advising students and working with them and things like that.
Thanks. And Bree, is the GA application open for the next academic year?
It should be open for students to apply for the next academic year. So typically students will go in, they'll select if they want to work for an academic department or non-academic department, and then they'll select their application year. So those applications should be open now. And then just to go back to that deadline, so the deadline to apply for a GA is a recommended deadline because we don't actually close the application portal. So we recommend if you want to have high consideration for a GA position that you submit that application by March 1st to apply for the upcoming fall, and November 1st for the upcoming spring. This gives the departments enough time to view the applications and get them submitted. Sometimes we get a lot of calls from students who are panicked because they've missed the GA deadline. So we tell them, you can still apply, but we do ask that departments get their application recommendations into the graduate college by May for like the fall semester. So the earlier you have your applications into the department, the earlier that they can review them and submit the recommendations to the graduate college.
And just to verify, applications are on the Grad Rebel Gateway?
Grad Rebel Gateway in the funding tab. So from the funding tab, you'll see a section for graduate assistantships and a section for scholarships. And then I'd also like to point out really quickly, just because a department is listed in the Grad Rebel Gateway that you can submit a GA application to doesn't mean there's actually an open position. We list all departments that are eligible to hire GAs on there. So if you're looking outside of your academic unit for a GA position, we strongly encourage you to go to the Career Services website and to sign up for the Handshake portal. We have departments submit their open GA positions there. So if you see something that you're interested in applying for, make sure you're following the application process that's listed on Handshake, but you also need to submit that application in the Grad Rebel Gateway.
I'm just getting the website here so I can send it to everyone. There we go. All right, so we know there are thousands of scholarships and fellowship opportunities outside of the graduate college. Do you have any tips for students on how to plan a strategic scholarship search? And maybe Nicole, you can get us started with this one since you probably applied to out of grad college ones as well.
Perfect. Yeah. So honestly, one of the best resources I've used are newsletters. So signing up for newsletters, whether that's within, your departments, the college. For example, like the one that I signed up for was like the Nevada NASA like EPSCoR newsletter. So that goes out like once a month, and they list out all opportunities related to like STEM fields, space research, anything like that. And then they'll actually list like the requirements like right on the newsletter. Another thing that I use, it's called Pivot Funding. So what you're able to do is anyone with a UNLV email, I believe, is able to sign up for an account, and you can set alerts to get emails when scholarships or fellowships open for areas of interest. So like for mine, I set them specifically in science education and for available for graduate students, and like specifically for me, like master's level, because I don't want to get any applications that are like PhD level, because I'm not in a PhD program, so I would not be qualified for them. So anything like that, I believe it's accessible through the library website. If anyone has, I can't remember how I got to it first, but I get to the, I basically get the emails. It's usually like once a week, and it's just like a summary of everything that is able to be funded for you. So those are kind of the tips. Also checking out like big funding organizations like NSF, NIH. A lot of them have sections specifically for graduate students where you could look through and see what you want to apply for the upcoming year.
So let me add a couple of things. These are all great points. And I think I got to pivot through the Office of Sponsored Programs, which gives me another idea on how you can find some of these links to the newsletters and such. What you should be doing is having an open conversation with your advisor or faculty mentor, because they are doing the same thing. They're seeking funding to support their research. And often those mechanisms have student fellowships or awards that are specific for students. And along those lines, some of the areas that you may not think about are things like professional organizations. For example, my students have been very successful in, as I mentioned, I'm a biomechanist. So they've received scholarships from the American Society of Biomechanics, from the International Society of Biomechanics, and things like that to support their research. And I have to think back when I was a graduate student, we're thinking about academic things, but my credit union offered a scholarship. So, think big, think beyond just UNLV and its resources.
And then I would just add in when you're doing your research on different types of funding that's out there, also just do your homework on it. Make sure that the places that you're applying are legitimate, that they're reputable organizations. Like Janet said, there's, your credit union, which you can be very confident that, that's a legitimate place. When I was an undergrad, I applied through Teamsters organization because my dad was a union worker. So just make sure that when you're applying that you know that you are applying for a legitimate place. We get a lot of emails of places that want us to post their scholarships online, and we're always very hesitant about that because we haven't heard of that funding. We don't know the organization. So just remember that you're also putting your personal information out there, so you want to make sure that it's protected.
Thank you. So diving a bit deeper into the review part of the application, what characteristics do committees look for when reviewing scholarship or fellowship applications? And maybe Janet, you can start us off on this one.
Sure, happy to do so. First thing, and I alluded to some of these things before, is the presentation of the package, right? You are presenting yourself as an academic and you want to rise to the top. So I'll give you an analogy. In the paper and pencil days, whenever I would have a student hand in a written assignment and they'd pull it out of one of those spiral notebooks and it had all those funny fringes on the end, that used to drive me crazy. That was not a stackable piece of paper, right? So the analogy here is good grammar, spelling words correctly, et cetera, et cetera. And this may not be in what the committee is looking for, but this is a tip to help you in preparing the best package. Once you might put words on a page, and this is specifically for your statement, you finish it once, I would strongly suggest that you look at it again and again and again. And the analogy I have is that when I'm writing grants and I write, for example, my specific aims, I have different iterations. And usually it takes me about 10 of those iterations to get something to the place where I'm happy with it. And if I'm only at 5, thinking this probably isn't very good. So what is the committee looking for? The committee is looking for logic, communication, being able to communicate in written words so that we understand what the intent is, what your intent is. And if it is a merit-based piece based upon your research and your research objectives, you have to be able to communicate your science or your creativity in terms that a broad-based committee can understand. So I'm not going to submit something that's talking about inverse dynamics to determine knee joint or muscle spasticity, because nobody's going to understand what that is, right? So be sure that you use language in your statements that any logical academician can understand, that it's not your area specific. I'll stop there because I'm sure others have a lot more to contribute, but that's a start.
I'll jump in here. Actually, I'm trying to think okay, so normally sometimes there's rubrics that individuals follow to score an application. So really, whenever you're looking at the question that you're supposed to put either in your research statement or your personal statement, there will be specific parts of it to address, where if it asks you for what's the broader impact of your research, you should 100% have a paragraph that says, this is the broader impact of my research. It feels kind of weird to outline it like that and to be so straightforward, but when you're thinking about how many applications that the scoring committee receives, you want to make sure that you've hit every single point that they're requesting in that application. I've seen so many great applications that have been thrown out just due to not fitting the actual requirements or not following the specific directions. So 100% check it, double check it again. You don't want to do a ton of work and then find out that because your margins were off or because you went over a page or, something that's so little, but it really helps winnow down those applications for the scoring committee. So that's why they do that. So just as soon as you know for sure that you have all of those requirements, then you could really start working on it and focusing on what you're actually writing about.
So if I could just piggyback on this, the converse of what Nicole said, making sure you have everything there. If you're given one page, use one page, okay? If something comes in and it's a half page and, I'm on this review committee, I'm gonna say this person must not think what they're doing is of value, that they're not communicating one page. Point number 2 is that white space can be your friend. Okay, you don't need to take that one page with half-inch margins and 12-point Arial font and just write black text, not indented or anything. Break it up, break up your ideas. In some cases, you may use figures or graphs to illustrate your point. So take advantage of all of those opportunities. Something swinging back that we talked about earlier, and it relates to something Nicole mentioned, and that is the piece about making sure that you address the specific questions or ideas that are, I'll just say questions that are posed. Not only should you do that, but you need to be sure that your reference writer is doing that as well and is speaking to those points relative to your strengths, hopefully not your weaknesses, but your strengths along those lines. Because as a reviewer, I can take a look at 2 recommendation letters, one being generic, which is, who writes a bad recommendation letter, right? They're going to say they sell, blah, blah, blah. But without any detail specific to you as a candidate, to you as an applicant, to you as what you add to the research team, that reference letter will not stand out. And that's part of your packet as well. So just because someone agrees to write a letter for you, it's probably not just check that one off, that's done from your perspective. Invest some time and make sure that that person really understands why you want to pursue this opportunity and why you are the candidate that should receive that award.
And then I'll share my screen real fast. Can you guys see this? This is the graduate college funding page. Let me go back to funding opportunities. Nicole mentioned the scoring rubric, and the graduate college actually puts ours online that the graduate awards committee uses to rank the scholarship applications that we receive. Sorry, guys. Technology is not always my friend. But you can see here for the graduate college fellowships and scholarships, we have the information about each award that we have available. We have general information and guidelines, so it talks about the deadlines, different statuses there, and then the required application materials. So this is the required application materials for each award that we have, but you can also see here that we post the rubric. So you can see here of how the committee would rank different aspects of your scholarship application. So I think that's really important to look at before you start crafting those materials. And then of course you can take a look at each individual award and you can see if there's anything that should be different in your letter of nomination. It gives some information there that you should go ahead and share with your recommendation provider. If your statement of intent needs to address anything specific, so make sure you're looking at that. I am not on the reviewing committee, but I do see a lot of statement of purposes. And one thing that always stands out to me is when the person writing the statement of purpose puts the wrong award on there. So they say, oh, I'm applying for the Barrick Fellowship, and they've actually submitted it under the president's. I notice those things, so I'm sure the committee does as well. So just, I would say, make sure you're watching that. There is a free service that you can plug into your Word document, your email. It's called Grammarly. I don't know how many people use that. I use it constantly. When I was a grad student, there was times when I actually paid for the subscription because something was really important that I needed to make sure that the content was perfect. So if it just depends on what you're applying for, how much it's worth. If you want to go ahead and buy a subscription service to make sure that your grammar and everything is on point. I use it now in my emails just through work. I think it's a great free service to go ahead and add onto your plug into your Google and to your Word document. And then let me try to stop sharing my screen.
Thanks, all. So we talked about following the directions and answering exactly what the application is asking for, but what are review committees looking for in the essay in regards to content? So what sets the candidate that receives the award apart from others, considering they both followed the same directions and we're just looking at their content?
I really find the personal touch, right? It's about you, and it's about you and your story. And for me as a reviewer, that always hits home, as opposed to simply, you know, I'm a 4.0 GPA student. I want to do this when I grow up and I need money. so, you know, everybody's in that boat, right? So what is driving you? What is driving you to achieve the goals? What are your goals? What's your 1-year plan? What's your 5-year plan? Having some objectives and goals beyond the immediate is also important. And then why are these things important to you? So it's okay to personalize. It's good to personalize, actually.
Thank you. So we have a question in the chat here. Do you encourage a non-traditional 50+ students to apply, or do you have any advice for older students?
Absolutely apply. Advice, all the wisdom that you've you've acquired in your years of life. So just age is not a discriminator, should not be viewed as such, is not viewed as such by the committee. As a matter of fact, you know, as a reviewer, I don't even know who's behind the pen, right? Nor should I. That's not a concern. So please do not set your own barriers.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. If anything, it gives you a lot more experience to write about and to say, this is why I know I want to do this research. This is why, you know, I'm involved in this program because of my life experiences. Along with that, I would also suggest too, because I've had a lot of students who have come to me who have been like, I don't really have a professor that I'm close with yet. So like where it's like if you just started within the lab or you just started in the graduate program, it's 100% okay to sit down with that professor and say, here are all the things that I've done in my life that you might not have known about. Obviously not like personal stuff, but you know, things in regards to like, oh, well, actually, this is where I worked for years. This is like the service that I had, so that they know more about you as opposed to just what you've done within your academic career with that advisor.
Thank you. What effects will outside scholarships have on my financial aid package? Maybe Bree can start us with this one.
Yeah, so that's kind of a difficult question to answer because it all really just depends on your financial aid status. It depends on your FAFSA, it just depends on what loans you're receiving, it depends on your cost of attendance. Typically, a university cannot give a student more money than it costs to attend. And so the things that factor into cost of attendance are your tuition, your fees, your living expenses, materials, all of that. So if you have a lot of different things going on in terms of financial aid with loans and grants, scholarships and fellowships, I would say reach out to financial aid. They're the experts in that area. Before you accept something, if you're worried if it's going to impact the amount of loans that you receive, anything like that, reach out first and ask the questions before you accept and just make sure everything is going to work out how you planned.
Thank you, Bree.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to this, but I think some sources of income are taxable and others are not. Correct?
Thank you. So are some components of the application weighed more heavily than others? And does this vary based on what you're actually applying for?
Whose dog was that?
That was me.
That was okay. Okay, so the weighting, I think it was excellent that Brian pointed out the rubric and you see what the rubric is. So you see how things are scored. And it's hard for to make a blanket statement because everyone carries implicit bias, right? And as a reviewer, we're trying to minimize these where we might say, oh, GPA is more important or recommender's letter is more important. They should all be weighted equally. And I cannot emphasize that enough, having just come off of a week of DoD grant reviews, Department of Defense grant reviews, that had, I think, 7 different criteria. And the organizers constantly were reminding the reviewers, all criteria are weighted equally. And I think that's kind of the going rate here today.
Thank you, Janet. Can you give some advice for international students?
I guess the best advice I would give is, I believe, and Bree can help me out here, but typically deadlines for certain steps are earlier in the financial process. So for international students, they may need to account for aspects relative to grade transcript evaluations or something like that, or even time to get the appropriate visa. So my first piece of advice would be just look at that timeline, and Nicole's already addressed the importance of that.
Then I would say for international students, for the scholarship, fellowship, and award side, pay attention to that alternate need determination form. While you're not eligible for things that other students who fill out FAFSAs are eligible for, there is funding out there for international students based on financial need. So that alternate need determination form is a really important aspect. It's same for the graduate college access grants that I was talking about before, that's based on financial need. For international students, we look at the alternate need determination form. So follow those deadlines for that form. I would always say work with OISS if you have any questions about visa status, if you're eligible for something. Check with OISS. They're the people that have all of the knowledge about everything that you need to do as an international student. I'd also say check the credit requirements. So for some awards that we give through the graduate college, we say, oh, you only need to enroll in 3 credits to be eligible for this award. Well, as an international student, you have different credit requirements. So just because we're saying 3 credits for this scholarship doesn't mean you still don't need to enroll in 9 credits to meet your visa status. So make sure that you're just making sure that you're doing everything, that you're following your visa properly, so you don't get in any risk in that area. And I can't stress enough, OISS, talk to your advisor over there. They're going to be the ones that know your story more than someone giving you an award for $1,000.
Thank you. So is it important to add activities that you were involved in at either school or in your community to your resume?
Absolutely. I think Nicole really emphasized the importance of this when we were talking about stories, and we were talking about, things that you had done, volunteer activities, community service organizations, things that you're not getting paid for or that are not part of your academic program. That just shows that you are a more holistic individual and that you contribute to other areas outside of what's important and relevant to you. So by all means, include that information.
Yeah, 100%. I have specifically gotten awards because of my service and involvement along with my research. I used to do CV editing back in my old office. And a lot of students who would come and say, well, I don't have any publications. I only have a couple conference presentations. I'm like, okay, well, do you have leadership positions? Do you volunteer? Maybe with a community organization or with your church or something like that. All of those things, they separate you out from basically everyone else, everyone has their unique story to tell. And it's really, really important to incorporate that into what you're interested in and why you want to do it.
Thank you, Nicole. This next question is more geared towards you as well. Were there any components that you focused on more than others while you were working on your application package, or was it typically the same amount of effort for each component?
So for my fellowship specifically, I actually went through to see what the goals of the organization were. So one of the requirements for my personal statement for the NASA grant was, how does this connect to NASA's mission and goals? So I literally went through the NASA strategic plan and I found like what their goals were for the upcoming year, because they release that every year. So I was able to incorporate that into my application and make sure that my research kind of pivoted towards that. So being able to really tell the review committee that it's like I'm paying attention to this application specifically, as opposed to making it more of like a blanket application, that's kind of what I really honed in on, as well as anything for like broader implications of research and things like that. I find that funding committees usually like what's the long-term impact? Like, why should we give you this money to succeed? You know, where it's like, what's your trajectory for success? Like, will you be successful after receiving this money? So being able to prove that is really like an important aspect of it.
Thank you so much, Nicole. So as we come to an end of our time together today with only a few minutes left, I'm just going to open it up to our panel to provide any last words of advice for our participants, and then we'll wrap it up.
I'll go ahead and start. You know, when we're talking this category of scholarships, fellowships, and such, you know, what you're doing is you're asking people or an organization for something. And there are going to be a lot of no's along the way. So my best advice for you is to be prepared for that. Don't take it personally. Try to learn from it. Perhaps look at the credentials of someone who was awarded the fellowship or scholarship. And I'll just close by saying perseverance. Okay, don't take a no personally, but just try to learn from it, move on, and take the next challenge.
And just to echo what Janet said, like I said earlier, we had 966 applications for just graduate college funding alone, and we had 145 awards to give out. So a no doesn't necessarily mean that your application was bad. The resources are limited. And then with 966 applications, it's not always easily available to give individual reviews of each award. So it's really important that you guys come to workshops like this, where you actually get some one-on-one time with people who've been funded, the people that are looking at the applications, and people who are involved in the award process. So anything you guys can do to strengthen your applications, just to watch the award deadlines, what the funding committee is asking to see in your application materials and things like that.
Yeah, and echoing both of those sentiments, I actually applied for the NSF GRFP. So it's like $100,000 award that's only awarded to 3% of graduate students. I didn't get it. I was rejected from it, and I was like devastated. I was like, oh my gosh, like I will never receive funding again. I'm not supposed to be in graduate school. That's not the case. Like, I promise you, it's okay to be rejected from awards. If anything, it strengthens your applications down the line. So for me, I was able to specifically take parts of that application that I knew were good, that I really liked, and apply that to other awards. So everything that you're working on, none of it's useless. Like, you will always be able to use that information, whether that's in like a research proposal or, you know, things like that. So don't think of it in like a negative way. Like, you never know till you try, you know? So it's like 100% okay to not get an award or a grant. Like, you can try next year, you know? And it's something where it's like, just don't let yourself be discouraged from it. And I know how hard that is. Like, especially as a graduate student, like you experience imposter syndrome or something like that. Like, I've been through it too, and I'm sitting here on a panel talking about grants. So like, it's totally possible. You just have to try and believe in yourself and be like, okay, no, I got this, I can do it. So good luck. And I'm always happy to like share application materials or things like that. I've had undergraduates come to me who have applied for awards before, and I'm like, I will 100% like give you my CV. You could see like how it's used as a template. You could see like how the application, you know, like how the application works, how all of these examples are. So, and I can also stay after if anyone has like specific questions. I'm totally happy to do that.
Thank you. And thank you all for sharing your time and expertise with us today. Your advice was super valuable to our participants. Thank you to our participants for joining us and coming to learn. We will be posting this workshop on the Graduate College YouTube channel within a couple of weeks for your reference. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you at our next workshop. Thank you.